So this is what?
Posterior root ganglion.
Okay, posterior root ganglion is here. This is posterior root, or maybe rootlets.
Rootlets.
Okay, and you can tell, I mean, posterior dorsal root. This is the anterior median fissure, posterior median sulcus. And this is sensory, right? What structurally, what kind of neurons? Unipolar or pseudo-unipolar is probably even better. And then this is the motor, right? The rootlets. And then when they come together, they are spinal nerve. So sensory rootlets are always sensory. Motor rootlets are always motor. So, but the spinal nerve is always mixed. Again, what about cranial nerves?
Mixed.
Always mixed? No, they can be sensory, they can be motor, or they can be mixed. Okay. But spinal nerves are always mixed. And the rami coming off, that branch off, like the ventral ramus, it's mixed too. When we get further down, you can have individual nerves being sensory or motor. Well, let's look at the pathway coming in. Okay, we're going to come in, and for fine touch, conscious proprioception, what is the pathway?
Posterior frontalis medial lemniscus.
Say that again.
Posterior medial lemniscus.
Right. Posterior lemniscus, medial lemniscus, also known as posterior column, medial lemniscus. And that name has the pathway of the first two neurons. In how many neurons in the pathway? Three. What's the third neuron going from?
Thalamus.
From the thalamus to the post-central gyrus. Okay? So the first one comes in, and what's that name again? Posterior
Funiculus.
funiculus. So we're going up where?
The posterior funiculus.
Posterior funiculus. Have I said anything about synapsing or crossing over?
Not yet.
Nope. So it just goes up the same
Not
side.
yet.
And where is it going to synapse?
Medulla.
Medulla oblongata. There's a nucleus gracilus and a nucleus cuneatus, because this is the gracilus here, and the cuneatus, they're carrying the same kind of information from different parts of the body. The gracilus is from where? Lower part of the body, and the cuneatus from the upper part of the body. Okay. The synapse there, those second neurons in the pathway do what? Cross over to the other side and go up
To the thalamus.
to the thalamus. And what's the name of that pathway? Medial lemniscus. And then from the thalamus to the
Post-central gyrus.
gyrus. And how much of the post-central gyrus is devoted to an area?
Depends on how many sensory receptors there are.
How many receptors there are, not the size of the body part.
So the medial lemniscus is just a sensory pathway. Nodding say yes.
Yes, I think so. As far as I know, yes.
Remember, Reggie's recording you, so.
As far as I know, yes. Okay.
So it's contingent upon the number of receptors.
Yeah, for how much of your brain is devoted to an area.
That's for sensory. What about motor?
Internal capsule is a mixture.
What about motor?
Yes, it
Is the
is.
same thing, two receptors as well?
No. How many motor units? You don't have receptors in motor. Okay. So if I cut in the cord all the way across, what do I lose?
Sensation.
On the
Sensation and
Motor. Everything below.
below that area. Do I still have reflexes?
Yes.
Yes, I can still have reflexes, okay? But everything below, both sides, okay? If I cut halfway across, where do I lose from that pathway?
you lose that pathway from below the top.
Same side, okay? Everything below on the same side. Now, what about what's another pathway carrying sensory information?
Thalamus.
Anterolateral.
Anterolateral spinal thalamic, also known as anterior spinal thalamic or lateral spinal thalamic. Anterior lateral pathways are anterior spinal thalamic or lateral cortical spinal thalamic. Okay. So that name tells you the pathway of which neuron?
Of the second.
Of the second neuron. Okay. So which is the one that always crosses over to the other side?
Second neuron.
The second neuron. So the first one comes in, and what happens?
Synapses.
Where?
And the left one. And on the dorsal root horn.
Dorsal.
Dorsal horn here. And then it crosses to the other side,
Through the right connection.
through the white concha, to either the lateral or anterior, depending on what kind of information. Lateral carries
Pain and temperature.
pain and temperature. Anterior carries things like itch and tickle and crude touch.
Deep
Deep
pressure.
touch, deep pressure.
You've yet to tell us what crude touch is.
Not from a specific part, not specific, not fine touch.
That's a fool, dude.
I'm not sure that really defines
Say
it.
what's a groove
No,
touch.
this is more general area. Let's start a general area versus a very pinpointed area.
Not as much fun as it sounds.
Yeah,
No,
crude
it's
touch
not
style.
much fun.
You can make up your mind.
That's very nice around associated with this.
Okay. So if I cut here, where do I lose from? In the spinal phalanx? Same side or opposite side? Opposite. Yeah, opposite because it's already crossed.
crossed.
Okay. As long as it's in the spinal cord.
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens in the medulla?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Right on through.
The name is spinal thalamic. No spinal medulla in
Bypasses
there. Okay.
medulla.
From the spinal cord to the thalamus, and then where? The usual. Postcentral gyrus. Okay. And then we also have the spinal cerebellar pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And information starting on the left side, the sensory winds up where?
Left side.
Left side. And information starting on the right side
Same
ends up
side.
on the right side.
So if you damage the right side of your cerebellum, you have
damage.
difficulty on the right side of your
Yeah, you're going to lose information from the right
That
side.
one crosses twice, right?
Or it
Or
does.
it's not-
Or it
It either does not cross
Or it crosses
or it crosses twice. So you wind up on the same side. And what kind of information is this?
Unconscious.
Proprioception.
Unconscious.
Subconscious proprioception.
Subconscious or
Subconscious.
Subconscious, unconscious, whatever.
Subconscious.
Things to be aware you have to
When you
reach
drive
the
it
cerebral
home, you
cortex.
didn't know how you got
If you
there.
don't reach the cerebral cortex, we have conscious proprioception. That's that first pathway you talked about.
Yeah, you just meet
Supposed
out
to,
and you're like, whoa,
you
am
know,
I home already?
But there's some
That's
subconscious
subconscious
too.
right there.
Information.
Just think
Okay,
about it.
now let's try the descending pathways.
Okay.
Like motor ones.
The motor pathways.
Why don't you guys let's go.
Extra
Descending.
Well, we're going to do the pyramidal first, or the, okay, the
we'll do
direct
the-
pathways.
we'll do the direct ones.
Direct
We're going to do
parabola.
the direct pathways first,
First.
also known as pyramidal pathways. Which cells do they start in?
Recentral
Pyramidal
cells.
cells.
Pyramidal
That's the
cells.
name, pyramidal pathways. And what do the cells look like?
Pyramids.
Kind of like pyramids with long axons. That's called the upper motor neuron. Where does it start out?
Precentral
Through the central gyrus, okay? And then as it comes down, it's going to pass by, before then, it passes by the basal nuclei.
Oh, it's the rhythm of walking.
Huh? Well, we're just talking about the pathway
Oh, the
through.
pathway, the internal capsule.
Internal capsule. The sensory and motor goes with that internal capsule. And that helps give that name corpus striatum, and why it looks striped, because there's white matter coming by the gray matter. Okay. As it passes through the midbrain, it's called the cerebral peduncles.
Same thing. Same thing. Just different name.
We'll teach you where to read it, don't worry.
Cerebral peduncles. These little feet.
What, Donkey Dog?
Dunkin' Donuts.
I know, not pedunculum. Okay, that would be the one.
Mess itself along.
Okay. As it gets to the medulla, what do we call it? The pyramids.
Pyramids.
Can you go back a little back?
Okay, internal capsule,
Okay.
cerebral peduncles,
Yes.
pyramids.
Pyramid, okay.
Okay, and what happens to most of the fibers in the pyramids?
Take a sec.
Take a
They
second.
desection, okay, so they cross to the other side. Which ones are the ones that cross to the other side? The lateral cortical spinal, because the lateral go to the limbs. L for lateral, L for limbs, okay? So they've crossed over, so if I cut the lateral, which side do you lose from? Same side or opposite side?
Same side.
Same side, because it's already crossed.
Same side.
The anterior, though, they just go down anteriorly and then cross at the last minute. So if I cut them,
Opposite.
opposite side.
So if you cut halfway through the spinal cord, you lose the limbs on the same side, but the trunk on the opposite side.
Right. What are the cortical bulbar tracts?
Head and neck.
So everything had, which nerves do we use for that?
Cranial nerves.
The cranial nerves are the lower motor neurons, okay? And I'm not worried about which one cross or don't cross because it gets kind of complex to understand. But and you saw this one here. That's kind of weird, right? That's cranial nerve. So that's sensory, not motor. So all the motor neurons that are cranial nerves are coming out of what part of the brain?
Brainstem.
Brainstem. Because everything comes out of the brainstem and the cranial nerves, except for the first two, which are sensory, primarily. And actually, when I say something is sensory, there's usually, when I say something is motor, there's also a little teeny bit of sensory, which is proprioception. Because when I'm moving a muscle, I also send information back to tell me about them. I'm sensing that. Okay.
Can we go over the rami and which ones come
Okay.
back and feed?
Okay, here we go.
Favorite one?
We'll do this
Did we
before
skip
do
that?
the
Communicate.
Talk about the white.
Did you skip that?
Yeah, the white and the gray.
Yeah,
She hasn't done that yet.
Let me first
She hasn't done that yet.
say that
Let's
Talk about that.
extrapyramidal pathways, are they conscious or subconscious? They're
subconscious.
subconscious. So they have to do with extra things like muscle tone and arm swinging and stuff like that. And they're very complex and multisynaptic. Huh? Shush up back there.
Daniel. I was talking to you.
They can't hear me because they're talking. So the extrapyramidal pathways, that's not the best name for them because it makes it sound like they're independent of the pyramidal, but they're not. Okay. So they prefer now to use the regular names, although clinicians still say extrapyramidal, right?
Right.
But they're not totally independent.
And they don't contain cortical in their names.
But they don't have cortico in their names because they're starting where? Not in the cortex,
Brainstem.
in the brainstem. And some move up and they go every which way and down and lots of stuff happens. And they can also feed into this lower motor neuron. Okay, so there can be some connections there too. Extrapyramidal pathways have to do, like say, with muscle tone and things like arm swing and stuff like that. And they're very complex. And let's see, okay, now what about the rami? Okay, so after the spinal nerve, we have branching and recombining. Okay, and those are called the rami. And coming off the back is the dorsal ramus. What does it serve?
The deep muscles of the back and the sensory of the skin.
Okay, deep muscles of the back and the sensory for the posterior trunk of the skin. And the ventral rami serve almost everything else, except for the meningeal branches, not shown here, turns around, goes back, and serves the structures inside the vertebrae. Okay. This is the ventral ramus then, right?
Yes.
And so where do we find, and those branching recombinings are called what?
Plexus.
Plexus, okay. So the plexus, I don't know which is plexus.
Plexus.
I think they're called plexus.
Plexus.
So where do we have them? For example, we have the
Well, we don't have them.
Cervical.
cervical serves the
Diaphragm.
a neck, part of the head, shoulder, diaphragm is right. Okay,
Diaphragm.
because that's a major one I want you to know. Phrenic nerve. Okay, and why is that important?
Breathing.
Keeps the diaphragm alive.
Yeah, C3, C4, C5, keep the diaphragm alive, infiltrates above that, you can't breathe, you die, okay? So unless you get somebody that helps you die, like Christopher Reeve did. Okay, so you already mentioned the phrenic nerve. The next plexus down would be the brachial, serving mainly upper limbs. What else?
Shoulder.
Shoulder and serratus anterior, okay? The one serving the shoulder is the
the
axillary. So that goes to the deltoid muscle and the teres minor.
Teres minor.
Okay.
Harvey might use it.
And then we have all this branching and recombining. So there's a little saying for it. It is
Real tired, drink
coffee
coffee
black.
Real tired.
Real tired, drink coffee black.
My mnemonic.
I
That's
thought
in
it
the
was.
month. Huh?
Real time drink coffee.
Oh, okay.
And okay, real stands for
Raymond.
yeah. It's actually ventral rami. They say roots, but it's not really roots. It's ventral rami. Tired is trunk. D, drink.
Divisions.
C, cords. And then black would be the branches, which are our nerves that we're talking about. So I want you to know the 5 nerves, major nerves, and plus one other. And if you look at the spinal cord, you'll see sort of an M shape, right? The axis is separate, comes off for the deltoid. There's an M shape, okay?
Where's that model?
It's over there.
Do you want it?
Sure, why not? It's kind of unwieldy.